Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Plazas from the USA Today Network Tennessee and the Tennessean. I'd like to introduce, before I say anything more, Mayor Pat Ford of Pulaski, Tennessee.
Thank you so much. Well, good evening.
Good evening.
All right. What a delight it is to have you all here. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Pat Ford. I have the pleasure of serving as a faculty member here at the University of Tennessee Southern. And on behalf of our Chancellor, Dr. Linda Martin, and our entire faculty and staff, we want to welcome you to our campus. As most of you know, because there's a lot of folks in the room that are local, I also have the privilege of serving as the mayor for the city of Pulaski. And I want to welcome you to our community, those of you that are not from here, but I want to welcome all of you here as well. And just tell you how delighted we are as a campus and a community to host this event this evening. So thank y'all so much for allowing us to do that, and we look forward to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So just to give you a little bit of an outline of the program tonight, there'll be two parts. It's going to be a one-on-one initially with Dr. Jason Martin, who's a Democratic candidate for the governor's race. And then we're also going to have a primary forum with two candidates for Congressional District 4. Both of them are Democrats. We are eager to welcome them to stage after the conversation with Dr. Martin. And they are Arnold J. White and Wayne Steele. But we're going to spend the first time with Dr. Martin. So Dr. Martin, if you could come up on stage, pick whatever spot you would like, and I will join you right there. Thanks so much. Want to make sure you can hear us properly?
No.
No? All right, we'll definitely have to speak up then. I'll make sure to speak up over here, and if anyone still has trouble hearing us, just raise your hand and we'll do that. All right. So I have the pleasure of having Dr. Jason Martin here, who was raised and educated in Alabama. He's a physician and business owner and has worked at Vanderbilt and Meharry Medical College, training physicians and as a healthcare advocate. He's running the Democratic primary against Dr. Carnita Atwater and Councilman J.B. Smiley, both of Memphis. Throughout these several forums, we've had the candidates here together. This time, due to scheduling conflicts, we have Dr. Martin, but we decided to turn it into an opportunity to have a one-on-one conversation.
That's right.
So I'm grateful for you accepting that. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you all for hosting this event tonight, Mr. Mayor. Nice to see you. Friends, it's great to be here at UT Southern, and great to be back in Pulaski.
So we may, because of some hearing issues, do you mind if we stand on stage
fine.
there? That may work
That
better.
way it'll stream.
Yeah.
I'll take my water.
So is this any better right here?
Yes.
It's a lot better. Okay, great.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Figure that's the worst thing when you can't hear a particular event. So essentially this is just a one-on-one where I'll be talking with Dr. Martin about some questions, and we'll get engaged in conversation as not awkwardly as we are here standing next to you. So, but I'd like for you to make some opening remarks, just to introduce yourself to the public, both in real life and virtually.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you all, if I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you yet, my name is Jason Martin, and I wear a lot of different hats. I'm a husband to Jennifer. She's a dermatologist up in Middle Tennessee. I'm a girl dad. I got 3 girls at the house, ages 15, 13, and 11. I'm a critical care doctor, which means I take care of the sickest people in the hospital. I don't have an outpatient practice. I'm just in the ICU. And I'm a candidate for governor to unite Tennessee. I have not been in politics in the past, but was drawn to it after seeing such staggering losses in the workplace as an ICU physician. My team had to say goodbye to more than 400 patients with COVID-19 in a little 18-bed ICU up in Sumner County. And I'm talking about having to make some really painful phone calls, like this one poor child who was a 14-year-old. She was the only English speaker in her family, so she had to bear the burden of translating messages from the team about her dad. And we had to call that poor baby in the middle of the night and tell her that daddy had died. And I was broken in that moment, and I felt like that poor child, she needed a voice, and her daddy needed a voice, and the business owners who lost their businesses needed a voice, and the school teachers needed a voice, because the pain that we were all feeling, in my opinion, was never met by leadership from the governor. And so I came to understand that the lack of leadership that we experienced in COVID, in my opinion, is pervasive across the enterprise here in Tennessee. We need leadership when it comes to public health more broadly. We need to expand Medicaid. We need leadership when it comes to public education. We need a governor who's going to stand up for our teachers when somebody calls them dumb. And so we have so much work to do, and I believe very strongly that we need to turn down the volume in Tennessee and fight for that which unites us. Great educations, access to health care, and great jobs, regardless of where you live. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you very much, Dr. Martin, for that introduction. What I'd like to do is also ask you about some recent news,
Sure.
and that is about the injunction that was lifted for the Education Savings Account program, also known sometimes as vouchers. Governor Lee has said that he's going to move forward with the application process and the program this upcoming school year. Tell us a little bit about your position on this, and what would you do if you're elected governor to address this particular program?
Sure. Vouchers are wrong. They are weapons to defund public education. They take money away from public schools and they siphon it out of the system. And this is at a time when we're already historically underfunding our public schools. You know, for the last decade, we've been 45, 46 in the nation when it comes to per pupil spending on our public schools. And that's created a crisis in education. And what did the governor do in that crisis? He blamed the teachers for it, right? That's not the right approach. The war that he's waged on public education has been, the voucher program. It's been politicizing school boards to consolidate power. It's been seeking to edit libraries, right, and control, what our kids read. He's not spoken out against book burning. He's fired teachers for teaching American history or asking kids to think about American history as it happened. And so I think that this is a consistent pattern for him. He doesn't advocate for public education. That's going to change when I'm governor. We're going to fully fund our public schools. We're going to support our teachers. We're going to stay away from programs that drain funds away from our already suffering public schools, and I'd love to have your support.
Thank you very much. Before I ask you about the general election, you are still in a primary. You're one of 3 Democrats. And tell us a little bit about your strategy. How is it you think that Democrats across Tennessee will elect you to be the nominee to run in November?
We get this question a lot. People are like, okay, you're a Democrat running in a very red state. What are you thinking? And I got to tell you that, I believe very strongly that the values that we are running on are strong Tennessee values, right? Everybody wants access to health care. Everybody wants access to a great school for their kids so they can have options for the future. Everybody wants infrastructure that's right on time, including broadband. So these are the things that unite us. These are the things that we're running on. And that's where we're getting traction, y'all. I think a lot of times Democrats want to just go to the big cities and try to turn out the votes there. But you have to have a more broad approach if you're going to win a statewide election. That's why our campaign has been to all 95 counties, you all. This is our second time here in Giles County. We've been 30,000 miles up and down I-40 talking about that which unites us instead of the issues that divide us. And let me tell you, there are a lot of people who benefit from chopping us up into East, West, or Middle Tennessee, or Republicans, or Democrats, or urban, or rural, or Black Tennesseans, or brown Tennesseans, or white Tennesseans. There's lots of people who benefit from chopping us up. And now is the time to realize that we have opportunities to do things together, great things together. We've been blessed with some economic prosperity. Let's use that prosperity to lift all boats.
Thank you very much. And that's a natural segue to the question about the general election, that if you are elected as the Democratic nominee, just some stats that people should know, that it's the last time a Democrat won the governorship was in 2006. And in 2018, Carl Dean won 38.6% to Bill Lee's 59.6%. Of course, he won between 55% and 62% of the vote in 3 counties, Haywood, Davidson, and Shelby. But in many counties, such as Wayne and Carter, he won by more than 80%. In Giles, he won by 70%. How would you win the general election if you were the nominee?
It's a great question. And the fact that I'm the only Democratic candidate who came to Pulaski tonight reflects a difference in the way we run our campaign and the way we see this race, perhaps as compared to my competitors. Because we believe that every single county should be included in the map. Every single county's issues are important. And look, when we published our policy platform, which you can find online at martin4tn.com/issues, that policy platform was informed from meeting thousands and thousands of Tennesseans on this 95 county odyssey that we started the campaign on. That was important for informing us about pinch points in individual communities, and we were able to use that and crystallize it into a policy platform that matters to folks. That's how you win. And look, when we go into a community that perhaps is not politically hospitable, right? We go in with an open heart and an open mind. I do not have all the answers, but I think I have a lot of great ideas, and I'm a good listener, and I start out by asking questions. You know, tell me about healthcare in your community. That is something that unites us. You know, there are very few people outside of the major cities who are excited about the amount of healthcare, the access to healthcare that they have in their community. So we started dialogue about those things that we can work on together. And then people realize, okay, you know, we may have some things that divide us or that, you know, separate us, but we have this huge realm of things that we can agree on. We're going to work on those together.
Thank you very much. One of the motivators for your run, as you mentioned, is the COVID-19 pandemic. As of last week, there have been 2.1 million cases in Tennessee and nearly 27,000 deaths. What would you have done differently? And if elected governor, what would you do since COVID is still with us regarding vaccines, restrictions, guidance?
Yeah. So COVID-19 has been a saga, and whenever you talk about what you would do, you have to think about where we have been, because, you know, recommendations have changed. My personal feelings about what we should be doing have changed as the data has changed, and also as we have gotten vaccines and we've gotten therapies and treatments that we didn't have at the very beginning. Look, Governor Lee failed to speak out and speak the truth. When you got people in the Government Operations Committee and the General Assembly trying to push horse medicine on people, when you got them trying to defund the Department of Health, when you've gotten them where they're trying to regulate professional boards that are trying to tell their physicians that they can't teach misinformation to their patients, you know, when you've got a governor who is threatening school districts who are trying to implement mask requirements to protect their teachers and their students, that's a lack of leadership, you all. And it cost people their lives. I was in the room holding the hands of people that were taking their last breath while their loved ones watched on an iPad and watched their loved ones die remotely while he's failing to lead. So, you know, I would use the data, I would surround myself with content experts, and I would come up with public policy positions that reflect the moment without worry about political ramifications. He was playing a political game, and it cost people their lives, and I can't wait to tell him about it on stage.
Abortion is set to become essentially illegal over the next 2 weeks in Tennessee. But there's legislation being proposed to blunt the impact, and in other states, groups like Planned Parenthood are suing the state to halt their laws. What should happen in Tennessee if you're elected governor?
Thank you. So, let's talk a little bit about Roe. I think it was a tragedy that Roe got overturned. I'm the dad of 3 daughters, ages 15, 13, and 11. I was so proud that my 15-year-old last fall got to speak at the Rutherford County women's demonstration, and she went out and basically pleaded with people to vote and to get involved because her health rights are on the line and she's not old enough to vote yet. So she's depending on all of us to do what we can for this situation. When Roe got overturned by the Supreme Court, that alone did not take away health rights from women here in the state of Tennessee. That dubious distinction belongs to Governor Bill Lee and the radical supermajority that passed that trigger law, y'all. And the trigger law is radical. It does not provide an exception for the life of the mother. Now, it provides a prescribed defense that a physician can use in their felony trial after they're taken to court with up to 15 years in jail at stake. They prescribes them a defense, but it does not carve out any defense for the life of a woman. And let me tell you this. I want y'all to listen to this. I don't know a single person who wants to see another abortion in the state of Tennessee, but I know thousands and thousands and thousands of Tennesseans who understand that government should not be involved in that decision. The government should not be in that doctor's office with a physician, her family, and her God, and the woman. The government should not be. I want to also add that abortions, you all, abortion restrictions, it doesn't stop abortions. It just stops safe abortions. The abortion restrictions proposed in this state don't stop abortions for everyone, only for folks in need. The people of means, they're going to hop a plane or train or get in a car and go to a state where the service is offered. It's our marginalized communities that are going to be hurt and pained by this. And I got to tell you, if you want to talk to me about taking care of families, let's talk about a social safety net for folks. Maybe that would help people feel like they have more options. Let's talk about access to healthcare. Let's talk about access to contraception. Let's talk about access to great schools. Let's talk about access to assistance for needy families. All of that needs to be part of this conversation. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's talk a little bit about rural hospitals. Tennessee leads, or second in the nation for closures of rural hospitals over the last decade. What do we do to ensure that Tennesseans get the care that they need?
Obviously something that's near and dear to my heart, access to health care. You know, part of my job, I told you, the majority of my professional career at this point was spent working at Nashville General Hospital, the safety net hospital in Middle Tennessee. I had a lung component to my job up there, so I was a lung doctor in that role. And I have been in the office and sat across from, I'm thinking of one particular patient who chose to die rather than get a biopsy of something we probably could have treated and extended that person's life because that person did not want to saddle their family with medical debt. I mean, my wife witnessed a conversation with me talking to that patient on the phone one evening from home, sitting on our couch, trying to implore her to let me find some resources, you know, and she chose to not go down that path and died on my watch, and that weighs heavily on me. That happens. She's a working person. That happens all the time in the state of Tennessee. So we're sitting on billions and billions and billions of dollars in a rainy day fund, y'all. Why can't we be as proud of fully resourced healthcare in communities as we are that big old pile of money? Why are they turning their back every year on a $1 billion plus that we could be taking back from the federal government for Medicaid expansion? We could be using that money to push back against some scary trends. You heard second in the nation in hospital closures. It's actually number one in the nation per capita. You know, so we're losing hospitals left and right. Also, we're number one in the nation when it comes to medical bankruptcies. Did you realize that? I didn't know that until we got into the race. We are breaking our families with medical debt. Do you know who pays the price at a disproportionate rate? Rural Tennessee. Rural Tennessee, where you're much more likely to be uninsured or underinsured than folks who live in the cities. So look, when the hospitals go, the businesses go too. We've been to all 95 counties. We have heard example after example where people tell us, you know, the plant left, the shop left, the factory left because the closest hospital is 95 miles away. A fifth of our counties doesn't even have an ER. A huge fraction of our counties doesn't have access to a gynecologist or an obstetrician, which is probably why we're 11th highest in the nation in infant mortality. A child dies every 15 hours in this state. It doesn't have to be that way, you all. We can use that money to push back against these trends and take care of one another. And I'll wrap it up by saying this. If you can't see with your heart that it's the right thing to do to take care of your brothers and sisters with money people are trying to give you, then for goodness sake, just think with your wallet, with your pocketbook, because it makes economic sense to bring healthcare back to rural Tennessee so we can get some jobs in here.
Yes.
Thank you very much. In my travels across the state of Tennessee this last year, I've been in Johnson City and Memphis, and I've heard some interesting trends in Pulaski and Martin, for example. One is the role of the federal government. Tennessee has a long history of being suspicious of the federal government. And number two, the role of faith in people's lives, that people have sincerely held beliefs about a lot of particular issues. This is one thing where Democrats seem to have trouble connecting with voters across Tennessee in general. Would you address a little bit about your thoughts on those particular issues and how do you break through?
So, you know, I understand that there's a lot of skepticism of government. And I think that, you know, that's just part of where we are right now. We have to remember that, you know, 60% of our state budget comes from the federal government. I mean, we are dependent on help from the federal government. And my opinion about government is that it's not here to tell you what to do. Government is here to help us solve big problems together. Things that, are beyond the scope of problem solving otherwise, like access to, like public education, for example. That's something that raises all boats, and government should be involved in that. Access to healthcare, infrastructure. Infrastructure is something that government has a great role in, right? Roads, bridges, broadband. And so there are things that government can do better than anybody else, and that's where the role is best used. When it comes to faith, I am a Christian, practicing Christian. Our kids are raised in tradition. We are respectful of other people's traditions as well, and I am probably less frequently talking about my faith on the trail because I try to stay focused on issues that apply to everyone. And my Christianity teaches me that we take care of one another. That's what drives me. I mean, that's what drives me in my role as a healer, as a physician, one who tries to heal anyway. And that's what drives me as a politician wannabe as well. Someone who wants to bring people together, who wants to heal the rifts and this red and blue tear that we've got going on. Someone that wants to heal the issues that we all struggle with. And so that's how Christianity informs my approach to politics.
Thank you very much. One of the questions that has been frequently asked during these forums is one that we're getting from the audience all over the state, which is how do you intend to prepare the next generation of Tennesseans to compete in the global economy, especially where we see unequal gains and growing income inequality?
So it is incumbent upon us that we invest in public education. And I don't mean to harp on this, but it's just so important, right? I went to public schools. It's how I got my start. My dad and mom both went to public schools. My dad was the first person in our family to go to college. And it changed the trajectory of our whole family. If you can get one child, into a career position, whether it's a post-college position or not, if you can get one child into a career position that they can hold on to for decades, it can change the trajectory of that family forever. So we need to invest not only in our K through 12 education by fully funding it and supporting our teachers, but we also need to invest in vocational programs. Because look, the number of kids going to 2- and 4-year colleges as a percentage is decreasing over time. Part of that's because student debt is outrageous. I mean, I'm 47 years old, still paying my student loans off, y'all. And so I understand that firsthand. But we need to make sure that there are options for folks to get good vocational training across the state. And I'm talking about, ag sciences, I'm talking about, plumbing, welding, whatever it is. We need to make sure our kids come out with a trade so they can go out and get right to work. Did I miss anything? Okay. Was there a second part of that?
No, but if you would talk specifically to the area around here, I mean, you like to say that you are from LA, Alabama, so Alabama's very near Pulaski, but if you could talk about the economy generally in this part of town, the District 4 area, that perhaps hasn't seen some of the gains that we've seen in Middle Tennessee, where both you and I reside.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things that I know when I walk out of my house and walk around Nashville, I mean, there's a dozen T cranes, dotting the sky. Growth is outrageous. And what we need to do is create an environment where growth can happen across the state. And that's something we talk about everywhere we go. And I think there's really 3 things in that formula, and we've touched on them already. One is education and workforce development, right? That's your K through 12 and your vocational training. So you got folks out there with skills. The other part of it is access to healthcare. Because, like I told you, who wants to come set up shop in a community where the nearest hospital or nearest provider is 100 miles away? It's not going to happen. The third thing you got to have is infrastructure. And I know every community has a road or a bridge that means something to them, or a water system. But there's one thing that unites us, and it's broadband internet, y'all. I don't know how your internet is out here. I've heard some complaints from some folks tonight, or some opportunities for improvement, I should say. But here's what I'll tell you. We're 34th in the nation out of 50 states in implementing broadband. Luckily, next year, when we take office next year, we're going to have a hand in distributing the money that's coming down from the federal government that's going to be earmarked for infrastructure. We believe there needs to be broadband implementation from Memphis to Mountain City. It is more than Facebook. It's more than YouTube. My oldest daughter says, don't forget TikTok. It's more than TikTok. It is a utility for businesses that are trying to set up shop. And so we feel like That is the recipe for growth in rural Tennessee.
Thank you very much. Recently, Governor Bill Lee has received criticism from both the left and the right for comments made by Hillsdale College President Larry Arnn about teachers being educated in the dumbest parts of the dumbest colleges. What was your reaction, and what should happen now with regard to that potential partnership with Hillsdale College?
You all, I was simply appalled that Larry Arnn stood up there and essentially, paraphrasing, called our teachers dumb, while the governor sat back with a smirk on his face and took a little sip of water, and the crowd laughed and mocked our communities. That is not leadership. And I understand, I'm trying to be given the benefit of the doubt. In that moment, maybe he didn't know what to do. Maybe it didn't occur to him what the right thing to do was. So then he's got several days to reflect on it, and reporters are asking him, do you care to walk this back? Do you care to speak out against it? And he's been silent. You all, that makes him complicit in that statement. I think he's silent about it because that's what he thinks about our educators. That's what he thinks about public education. He is not fit to be the governor of the state of Tennessee with that mindset, you all. And the waffling on important issues, the failure to speak up at times when it's so important for a leader to be there, this is not the only example of it. Let's talk about when the General Assembly passed a law making it basically a felony to be homeless. He thought it was a bad idea, but didn't have the courage to veto it. Just let it slide on through and become law without his signature because he didn't want to cross the General Assembly. Let's talk about the Truth in Sentencing Act that got passed, which basically makes it harder for folks who are in for-profit prisons to get out on good behavior when they have certain infractions that got them into jail. He put a statement out saying that was a bad idea. It was not going to be effective. It was going to cost our communities money. It was going to overcrowd our prisons even further. But what did he do? He let it become law without his signature because he doesn't have courage to lead. We got to do something about it. We've got to make him a one-term governor.
So recently there's been discussion about whether the Republican National Convention should come to Nashville. Nashville is one of two finalists, along with Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to receive the RNC in 2024. Would you discuss your thoughts? Should the RNC be here? And could you discuss the pros and cons, perhaps? Because we're hearing the business community says it might be good for business. There are safety concerns. And there's also the concerns that this could thwart a future DNC, Democratic National Convention, coming to Nashville at some point.
It's a really tough question, and it's one that I've toiled over, to be honest with you, tried to think about both sides of it. There's a business argument, to want to bring him to town, but I just cannot support bringing the party of insurrection to my city. I just can't do it, and then that's where I land. I think there would be security concerns for me and my neighbors in Nashville. I think that. It would not be in our best interest as a community to bring the RNC to Nashville.
And I want to ask you a little bit about some things related to some infrastructure when it comes to the energy sector. When we had the announcement a few months ago that Ford was going to be building the largest electric truck plant in the country in Blue Oval City, not too far from this area. And with the possibility of bringing in jobs. How do you see the future of energy security and also energy balance here in the state of Tennessee? And especially we have had that Supreme Court ruling that basically said the EPA cannot regulate power plant emissions. What are your thoughts in terms of the future of energy, especially in Tennessee?
All right, I'm going to come back to that. I want to say a few more things about RNC real quick. The Nashville Metro Council has spoken out on the RNC visitation issue, and they said no, we don't want it in our community. So what does the state do? The state is contemplating having a special session to come in and force their will on Nashville. We need to speak out as well against state preemption of local decisions. I believe that government is most effective when the people closest to people on a daily basis are making decisions for them. And so I think it's very important that we speak out against the state preemption that is being threatened to the Nashville Metro Council. Let me talk about green energy. The green oval, I'm sorry, the green oval. That's kind of a green oval. The blue oval city development, which is going to bring another green energy project to the state of Tennessee, is going to be transformative to the region. And we're talking about and when we talk about it, we don't just talk about it as a car plant. We talk about it as making more electric cars, y'all. We're doing it all across the state. We're doing it in Chattanooga. We're doing it in Spring Hill. We're doing it in Smyrna. We're leading the nation in this sector. That's a big deal because, it not only brings manufacturing jobs, which, by the way, we need to support labor when Ford comes to town so they have a fair shake of the table, but it also brings a lot of subcontractors, a lot of technology jobs with it. And those are great for our communities. So we need to be talking about our green energy props and really talking that up. I think that TVA is looking at their 20-year plan right now. What's their energy mix going to be in the long term? There was recently a study that came out that looked at the number of billions of dollars they're going to have to spend to continue to grow their energy capacity. There's an argument for taking that money that they're going to have to invest anyway into a greener energy mix. And there's been an analysis that shows that you can make more investments in renewables, produce the same amount of power growth, and it's going to be better off for the environment. So I think we should encourage TVA to move towards that greener mix. Let me tell you one story that I think illustrates the power of green energy in the state of Tennessee. Who's ever been up to Lake County? Anybody? All right, yeah, Ben, he was with me. Yeah, so Lake County's in northwest Tennessee. It's basically right on the Missouri border. It's a 120,000 acre county, 80,000 of which are cultivated, so very rural community. About 5,000 or 6,000 people in the community. We're going to have coffee with the mayor. As we're driving in, we're driving past all these barns, and they all have a little solar panel on top of them. And we hadn't seen that at that point in the drive. And so I'm like, goodness gracious, seems like, it's standing out to me. So I asked the mayor about it. He said, oh yeah. I convinced the farmers that it would be in their best interest to invest in solar. We had a lot of community meetings about it. I taught them about it. We applied as a community for a grant. And so with this grant, they were able to get these little 10 kilowatt hour solar installations on their barns that paid for themselves in 3 years. And the mayor's like, if you can save a farmer $1, you've got their attention, right? And like everybody else. So then the community decides to double down on solar. They buy over 2,000 acres of land as a community, and they market it, and they get a solar provider to come put in a for-profit power plant scale solar installation here, hundreds of megawatts. So the company's coming in, they're making money selling electricity to TVA. Of course, that's green energy, so that's good for the environment. The tax revenue from that new facility built Lake County a new high school. Isn't that wild? And so then in this new high school, they're thinking, all right, this is an opportunity for us to give our kids high-paying technology jobs right here in our community. So they bring people over from Germany to train them on how to do the high-powered electronic controllers for the solar installation. So with one green energy idea, one mayor in a 120,000 acre, mostly rural county, they've gotten green energy, they've gotten a new tax base, they've gotten a new high school, they've got new jobs for their kids. That is the creativity of green energy. We need to build on that.
I want to ask you next about investing in rural parts of Tennessee. About 70 of 95 counties are considered rural. About 93% of the landmass of Tennessee is considered rural. It's been identified by the current governor a few years ago that he wanted to invest especially in 15 of the most low-income counties, which generally tend to be in West Tennessee, but we also have some in Middle and East Tennessee. Would you talk a little bit about what your plan is to serve residents of rural communities?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I agree with the tiered system of incentives that's in place here in the state of Tennessee to try to draw businesses with tax incentives to more distressed counties. But look, it's like we said before, you're not going to get businesses to come to those counties. As good as our ECD people are, economic and community development people are, you're going to have a hard time bringing people to those businesses or to those areas without access to healthcare, infrastructure, and a well-trained workforce. And again, I go back to that three-part formula that we have to have checked off in order to create a condition where growth can take place in rural Tennessee. And listen, I also want to use this opportunity to tell you a little bit about legalization of cannabis, because I think this could be an opportunity for rural Tennessee as well. And sometimes people chuckle and get uncomfortable when we talk about it, but let me just disarm that and tell you that this is something that's been done by, I believe, 19 other states. Let's look at the state of Colorado, where there are 1.5 million fewer people than we have right here in Tennessee. They're generating about $400 million of tax revenue every year. Let's take that money and invest it in distressed counties. Let's take that money or that opportunity and give our farmers a new opportunity to save their family farm. Let's take those law enforcement resources that we're using to lock up primarily black and brown Tennesseans for small drug offenses. Let's stop doing that, y'all, and use those law enforcement resources where they're more appropriately applied. Let's give our veterans with PTSD or chronic pain a medical alternative that is regulated. Let's take the power away from the cartels. Y'all, there's so many reasons why we need to do this, and this would be a huge benefit to rural Tennessee.
Hey.
I'd like to ask you specifically about issues related to intellectually and developmentally disabled citizens here in Tennessee, or anyone who has a disability. Some have said that 1 in 3 Tennesseans have a disability, and there has been some progress legislatively from adult changing stations to the Katie Beckett waiver to allow people to be covered for the care that they might not be able to afford. What more needs to be done to serve some of our most needy residents here in the state?
It's a great question. So here's what I have to tell you. I don't have all the answers. I am a really good ventilator driver, having done it for 20 years. There are a lot of things I still have to learn about, right? And so this is an area where I'd have to, rely on experts in the field, rely on content experts, and ask them questions about where the needs are, what do we need to do better, where do we need to put our money and our time and our resources. And I think, it's good for a leader to admit their limitations. I think it's good for a leader to say, hey, listen, I need to bring people together and ask questions to come up with the right answer together. And that is the approach that I'm going to take as governor. It's going to be inquisitive. It's going to be data-driven. It's going to be collaborative. But I absolutely, agree with you that we need to be spending resources to take care of everyone in the community and not just a certain subset of folks.
Thank you very much. I wanted to ask also about economic development. Some critics have said it's been unequally brought to places like Middle Tennessee or maybe to Memphis. What would be your approach to bringing in companies? We've seen an influx of companies from Amazon to Oracle coming in, which have brought the promise of six-figure jobs, but typically a lot of the homegrown residents don't tend to benefit from that. What would you do to address that?
So, again, big question. So the folks who work in economic and community development here in the state of Tennessee have a huge job. They go all over the world bringing companies to our state. And there are a lot of things that draw companies here. And I'm talking about our natural resources, our geographic proximity to most of the United States quickly by air. We actually have a port, if you don't know that. We're connected by rail down to Savannah. So we have a port that we're close to in terms of production. So all of those things are helpful to us. One of the things that I am told in conversations is that we need to be more friendly to marginalized communities. That sometimes companies, they may have some hesitations about relocating here because of some of the slate of hate that we've seen come through the General Assembly, right? Is this a place where we want to bring our families? Is this a place where we want to tell our workers that they're going to have to raise their children? I believe in a Tennessee that works for everyone. I believe in a Tennessee that no matter the color of your skin, how much money you have in the bank, who you choose to love, what your native tongue is, Tennessee should be a land of opportunity for you. That's the Tennessee I'm fighting for, and I hope that's the Tennessee you're willing to fight for too, because that's the Tennessee that's going to build prosperity for everyone across the state, regardless of whether you're in a city or a county, in a rural community. And then I always want to fall back on things I told you previously. Education, healthcare, infrastructure. You've got to have those in place everywhere to grow the economy.
Before I get to my final two softer questions, I did want to ask you about a situation that's happened in Tennessee over the last 2 years, which is addressing what's known as divisive concepts and the opportunity to eliminate curriculum or books and resources for public libraries and school libraries. Would you talk a little bit about your position on this issue, and if elected governor, what would you do?
So, obviously, we have to chip away at the General Assembly supermajority to bring them to the table, because right now they're passing legislation that is not consistent with our values. And they're just not, and they're damaging our children. I had a chance to have dinner with a teacher from East Tennessee who lost his job for teaching a divisive concept. He basically asked his kids to respond to an essay. He didn't tell them what to write. He didn't tell them what to think. He just said, read this and respond to it. He lost his job. And this is a gentleman who had gone to this particular high school, grew up in that community, went off to college, got a certificate, came back, was devoting his life to serving his community, and they got rid of him in a heartbeat. That's wrong. And you know, the fear and the hesitation that puts in the minds and the hearts of our teachers right now is devastating to our communities. Y'all, we got 1,000 open teacher positions in the state of Tennessee. I saw it in the news yesterday. Who wants to take that job when you've got the heavy hand of the government looking over your shoulder, or hanging over you? Got them breathing down your back all the time when you're trying to do your job with limited resources. So I think we need to, speak out against editing libraries. For goodness sake, why are we attacking librarians in 2022? Why are we attacking our public servants? It's unimaginable to me that we've gotten to this place. And so I think it's time that we turn down the volume, speak out against it, and get these guys out of the General Assembly so we can make some changes.
This is a question I've asked the candidates in every part of the state. So hopefully they've done some of their work and research on the cultural institutions and restaurants here. One or two places that you say visitors need to come to when they experience Pulaski or Giles County or the surrounding area?
Actually, I knew this was coming. No, but it was easy for me because we were here last winter and we met in the town square. And there was a farmer's market going on. It was a weekend morning. And please help me find the lady who made the cinnamon honey butter. It was so good. And we got some fresh pastries from her that morning. And that was a highlight for me too. Obviously is it the Middle Tennessee State Fair, that's a big deal. We brought, no, is that? Yeah, that's right. It's one kind of north of here, right? Yeah. But it's in the region, and it's super fun. We brought the kids down for that before, too. But yeah, I love a walkable community. I love a community where you can go around and buy crafts and goods from folks who are just making it with their hands. And so I enjoyed that moment.
Then my final question before I turn it over for any closing statement from you is, name a person who's had a deep influence on your life, and what's a lesson you could share with the audience?
So I've talked about this before, but I want to mention my grandmother. Her name is May to me, Mary Stevens. She might be watching tonight, actually. She tunes in to most of these forums. She's in her early 90s, and she had some challenges in her life that I think that she overcame, and I think make her a tremendous example for resilience for my three daughters. She was a stay-at-home mom, worked in the house, and my grandfather, he passed away from a brain tumor in the 1970s. So they were, young adults, middle-aged to young adults. I think they're in their 40s. It's getting younger and younger. My mom and her sister were in their teens. And so here she was, a homemaker her whole life. In the 1970s, now a different time, with two teenage daughters alone. And, they were working people. My grandfather was a lineman for the power company. They weren't rolling in money. And so she had to go to work, and she went to a company called GAF. I don't know if you know GAF. It's a shingle company. And so she, as a woman, went into this man's industry at the time and was selling shingles to contractors and ended up being very successful and had a great career and was able to provide for her family. And she has told me that when things happen and when you fall down, you got to dust yourself off and get up and keep going. what a powerful lesson. And not only just to say the words, but to walk the walk. And I love to hear her talk about those times to my daughters and to tell, because I think it's such a great example for them, because they will have hard times in their life. And I hate that. But they will have powerful examples too from my grandmother.
Yay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jason Martin. Before I turn it over to you to make final remarks, just a reminder that tomorrow, Friday, July 15th, is the start of early voting over the next 2 weeks, and you have Election Day on August 4th, so please go and vote during this period. Dr. Jason Martin, back to you for some final remarks.
Yeah. David, thank you so much for hosting these events, and thank you all for attending. Thank you all for coming to listen to a guy who has never done this before. Speak from the heart. I tell people I am not the most polished speaker that you will see tonight probably, but I am speaking the truth as I see it, and I hope that means something to you. One thing I want to tell you, people ask me all the time in this experience, what have you learned? What's the take-home lesson for you? And for me, it's that as I've visited all 95 counties in the state of Tennessee, 30,000 miles up and down I-40, it's that we have so much more in common than that which divides us, you all. We really do. We really do. And that's how we're going to make a difference in this race. That's how we're going to win this race. We're not going to focus on divisions. We're not going to take the bait when the other side tries to raise the volume. I'm a healer. I'm not a name caller. I'm not a flamethrower. My job is to turn the volume down, work with who's ever there, and get things done for the state of Tennessee. And so here's my ask for you tonight. I need you to vote. We are in the bottom 40s in the nation when it comes to registering voters. We're in the bottom 40s in the nation when it comes to turning out registered voters at the polls. We have to push back against that for all of our sakes. And I ask you to vote for me. I ask for your support in this primary and then in the general election so that we can take care of one another, because we believe in a Tennessee that works together, because together we're going to thrive. Thanks, you guys.
Well, thank you for coming. Thank you, Ben, for being here. And at the same time, I'm very grateful as well to our technical team, Abby Stanton and Kevin Hood, and also Jeremy Harmon, who's here doing the live stream. At this time, I'd like to call up the candidates for U.S. House District 4, Wayne Steele and Arnold J. White, please. Let's make sure first the test, the mics are working. You could just say, give me a test, 1, 2, 3.
1, 2.
Perfect.
1, 2, 3.
All right, excellent.
Test.
All right, well, thank you very much, and welcome to the second portion of the USA Today Network Tennessee Election Candidate Forum. We're delighted to host this with the University of Tennessee system, and we're here today at UT Southern in Pulaski, Tennessee, in Giles County. We are in District 4, which is in this southern part of Tennessee, in the middle part of Tennessee, and we have two candidates who are running for the Democratic primary. I want to introduce Wayne Steele of Fayetteville, Tennessee, a small business sole proprietor, is a licensed massage therapist for 12 years, who had stints working for the U.S. Census Bureau and most recently worked as a COVID contact tracer. And we have Arnold J. White of Smyrna, Tennessee, who's retired after 36 years at BFS Bridgestone, Firestone, and other jobs before that. The format itself is this. We're going to have each candidate give up to a 90-second opening statement, and in each question they'll get 60 seconds. I'll be your timekeeper up here, so politely tell you when time is up. And then we'll end with a 90-second closing statement. You are welcome to use the whole time or just a portion of that time. At this moment, what I'd like to do is ask Mr. Wayne Steele to start with an opening statement, to introduce yourself to the audience, both in person here at UT Southern and also in the live stream.
Well, thank you for having me here tonight to introduce ourselves and talk about the issues. Like Mr. Plaza said, I'm Wayne Steele from Fayetteville, Tennessee. Born and raised 7th generation Tennessean. Massage therapist of 12 years. about 20 years in healthcare and been a sole proprietor for about 12. Many people might ask how a massage therapist would equate to being a congressman. But I've worked with people from, lived in poverty, but also worked with people all the way to taking my massage table into multi-million-dollar homes. So I have a lot of experience working with people in rural areas and metropolitan areas to know what the issues are, what the issues that we live.
Thank you very much. And Arnold J. White, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you. I'd like to open my opening statement with 2 quotes and 1 tweet from last week. Quote number 1, when the answer is simple, God is speaking. That's Albert Einstein. Quote 2, an invasion of armies can be resisted, but not an idea whose time has come. That's Victor Hugo. And the tweet was, if a politician is asking you for votes or money, you can ask them for a plan. Pressure makes us better. That's from AOC. I am running for Congress so I can publicly share several simple ideas that I know will help solve humanity's most pressing and most important problems. And the most pressing problem facing humanity is global warming and climate change. According to the latest IPCC report, look it up, we must cut our oil use in half within the next 8 to 10 years in order to have any chance of stopping and reversing climate change and global warming. And the most effective thing we can do to achieve that 50% reduction in oil is converting the 1.5 billion fossil fuel vehicles
Thank you
on
very
this
much.
planet.
Thank you very much. So the 2 gentlemen, Mr. Steele and Mr. White, are running for the Democratic primary on August 4th. Their opponent is unopposed, U.S. Representative Scott Desjardins, Republican, who is the incumbent. He was invited, but his office informed me that he could not attend due to his being in session in Congress today. The next several questions, you'll have 60 seconds each to respond, and we'll go back and forth. We'll start with Mr. White. And this question is, Representative Scott Desjardins, who's been in Congress since 2011, is unable to be here today, but he comfortably won his 2020 election with 66% of the vote. First, how are you appealing to Democrats to win your primary? And finally, if you win the nomination, how will you appeal to all District 4 voters? Essentially, how will you win?
I will win by getting more votes than my opponent. How to do that? Well, you have to try. My name is on the ballot. I have a chance. If my name was not on the ballot, I would have no chance. And it will be a miracle if I do win both the primary and the election. But I have faith in that goodness will always prevail.
Keep on going, you still have time, I'm sorry.
Excuse me?
Keep on going, you still have time.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I'm just trying. I am not a politician. I do not have the education to be considered a politician, and that might be a good thing.
Thank you very much. Mr. Steele, same question for you. So the question is again, Scott Desjardins has been in Congress since 2011. What are you doing to ensure that you can first win the nomination for the Democrats and then beat Representative Desjardins?
Well, throughout this primary season, I have went to, I believe it's about 13 of the 15 counties in this district. I've went to multiple Democratic Party monthly meetings to engage local voters to hear what their issues are. I am also a man of statistics. I have a science background, so I know what math is like that we're facing against Desjardins, either one of us. The way that I would engage during the general, though, is that unlike many people that we have, our countries come to tear each other apart and separate ourselves from people who we don't agree with politically, and separated ourselves from Trump voters or Democratic voters or whatever. I've not done that. I know and have known how to continue to speak to Republican.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Would you like to finish your thought?
Just that, you know, I lost it now.
All right.
But,
Well, then we'll start with you, Mr. Steele, and then with Mr. White. Inflation has reached the 40-year high, rising to more than 9% year over year. Ordinary citizens are struggling to pay higher gas prices and grocery bills. What can you do if you're elected to Congress to improve the quality of life of citizens? We'll start with Mr. Steele.
First off, I do agree that with the bill and legislation to help lower Medicare and prescription drug costs, you have to offset what people are paying right now because the corporations are taking advantage of Americans and driving up the price of gas to try to hurt Democrats, in my opinion.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Then, Mr. White, again, what can you do if elected to Congress to improve the quality of life of citizens given the record high inflation?
Several years ago, I had the idea of how you can power electric vehicles without batteries, how you can power them by compressed air. And I could go into that, but it would take up most of the time. But I believe the most expensive part on an EV are the batteries. If you could eliminate that, you could drop the cost of EVs by 20, maybe 30% or more. And imagine never having to buy gas again and never having to pay out thousands of dollars to replace your batteries when they are worn out. My idea, I'm not an engineer, but I know it will work because there are 2 cars right now that are being built that you can combine the drivetrain from those 2 cars and it'll work.
Thank you very much. The next question will start with Mr. White and then go to Mr. Steele. Members of Congress are considering codifying abortion rights into law after the Supreme Court ruled to overturn Roe versus Wade. How would you vote on this proposal and why, Mr. White?
I would vote yes to codify. I believe that every woman has a right to make that decision on her own and with her doctor. These laws that are outlawing abortion and outlawing choice only affect the poor women. Rich women have never had a problem obtaining any medical care that they need, including abortions. They can go overseas. They can do what they need to do. These will only affect the poorest of the poor. And this is a travesty, and it will not stand. I would vote to codify.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Steele, the same question for you.
Yes, I would vote to codify it into congressional law. The problem that I have with the thought of that is that we have to think in today's terms that Dobbs is the new precedent. Roe is not the precedent anymore, unfortunately. And so the reality is that if we pass that in the House and Senate and the president signs it, then red states that have made abortion virtually illegal are just going to file a lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of this new federal law. And they're going to stand on states' rights argument, and they're going to say that Dobbs is the precedent. The same Supreme Court is going to decide this. And so my solution and vision is a constitutional amendment, reintroducing the Equal Rights Amendment and codifying abortion into the Constitution.
Thank you very much, Mr. Steele. Appreciate it. The next question will start again with Mr. Steele. And Congress recently passed bipartisan gun legislation. How would you assess this law? Too far, not enough? What would you have changed? Mr. Steele.
It did not include red flag laws, correct?
It included incentives for the states to,
But not
but it
required.
didn't require red flag laws.
Okay, I don't think that it went far enough, because one of the arguments was that one of the shooters had a history from his childhood of violent tendencies. Well, under red flag laws, you would have record of this, or you would have a way of reporting this as an issue so that people couldn't get a gun. I'll admit at first I wasn't for getting rid of AR-15s, but after Uvalde, if we were supposed to use those to fight a tyrannical government, and that government isn't even going to protect us in our schools, then I don't really see a point of why people need them.
Thank you very much. Mr. White, the same question for you. On the bipartisan gun legislation, did it go too far, not far enough, and what do you like, didn't like about it?
It's a constant progression of moving forwards. We have to find a way to control people who should not be, folks who should not have access to guns should not have access to guns. Law-abiding citizens should, always, but they should be, the very first words of the Second Amendment are well-regulated. We need to regulate guns. If you want to go fishing, you have to have a license. If you want to go hunting, you have to get a license. You want to drive, you have to have a license. If you're mentally ill, go get a gun, free.